Welcome to A Conversation with History. I'm Harry Kreisler of the Institute of International Studies. Our guest today is Alice Karekezi, an international lawyer and a visiting fellow at the Human Rights Center at the University of California at Berkeley. She is a monitor for the International Tribunal for Rwanda and a program officer for justice, human rights, and governance at the National University of Rwanda. Welcome to Berkeley.
Thank you.
Tell us a little about your family's story. When did your parents emigrate from Rwanda to Zaire?
My parents immigrated in 1961 from Rwanda, and each of them with their own families, and they went, all of them, in Goma. Goma is a small town between Rwanda and Zaire, former Zaire, in Zaire.
And so you grew up and had your secondary education in Zaire?
Yes, I was born, I grew up, because my parents met there. I was born, grew up, and be educated in Zaire.
What does your parents' journey to Zaire tell us about the history of your country?
My parents' journey in Zaire was not a journey as such. They went as refugees after the 1961 elections in Rwanda. These elections, supervised by the United Nations, led to massacres, and they ran away from Rwanda. They were refugees.
And they stayed. They were unable to go back because you spent most of your youth there, right, in Zaire?
They stayed. They only went back after the genocide of 1994 in Rwanda.
And so what did you consider your national identity to be as you were growing up? How did you form your notion about what country was your homeland?
It was very ambivalent because I was Rwandese and I was recognized in the street as Rwandese. In 1972, we have been given, Rwandan refugees who wishes to do it, will be given the citizenship of Zaire. And we became Zaireans in a collective manner. But I've always been also Rwandese. So I've been always identified as Rwandese, and I learned it, as I say sometimes, in the street.
And by that you mean through discrimination, or people identifying you by your place of origin?
Yes. I was 5 years, and I was in kindergarten. And whenever I was coming from class, I met some of the children of my age, and they were waiting for me to tell me Rwandese, to pull my cheek, to touch my skin, and to say Rwandese, to sing some annoying songs I wasn't understanding. But one day, one of my colleagues from class come and say in a very disagreeable way, say Rwandese as an insult. I didn't know about that, and I was sure that it was an insult. I went back home and tell my mother that I was insulted Rwandese. And what's happened was strange for a young girl of 5 years. My mother, from whom I was expecting some compassion, some sympathy, told me that I wasn't insulted. I come with tears in my eyes. And I was hoping to have some smooth wood and to be consolated in brief. But he said, no, they didn't very severely. They didn't insult you. They told you what you are. This created a type of problem to me because my father, who was busy learning me to read.
He was a teacher, is that correct?
Before leaving Rwanda.
Right.
At that time, he wasn't. And I discovered very late that he has been, in his other life, a school teacher. He was showing me this citizen card, identity card of Zaire. He was, as a refugee, so happy to acquire a new citizenship. So he was telling me that we were Congolese. And my mother told me that they didn't insult me. They told me what I was. The other troubling thing is that she started to evoke when they have been expelled from Rwanda, as the home was burned, looted. So that's how I learned that I was Rwandese, and I decided to be also Rwandese.
How did your parents shape your character, looking back in retrospect?
I really can't say what is the acquired part of the character and what is the genetic component.
No one can answer that. That's right. Yeah.
I'm not competent for that, but what I can remember is that my parents really looked after me, and my father was really busy to learn me reading and writing before I learned it at school. And also, he wanted me to know as more as possible. He fed me a lot with books. And these books were telling, well, most of the time describing the noble parts of the humankind.
And were these, what language were these books in?
In French. We were educated in French.
And there is a name attached to these books you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
In French.
Bibliothèque Rose. Yes, they were very, very nice books with nice characters of person. My father attached importance to be servable. I don't know, servable, to serve others.
And to solve problems for others, or serviceable?
Yeah, serviceable,
yeah.
Yes. And my mother was considering that to be selfish is one of the worst things. And what I remember they have done, both of them, is to incite me to be as ambitious as possible. I've never been really taught to be, to cut my ambition, to, for example, to substitute it to get married, for example. Some of my friends at the same moment were taught to become very good women, quote unquote.
In a traditional sense, to think of marriage and children.
Yes, in a very broad traditional sense. I mean, not only in Africa, but what's we expect from a girl or a woman. Maybe my mother is regretting now because I've learned the lesson.
I think not, yeah.
But, my mother has enhanced the need of being independent, always. Say, the day you live with a man, make sure that you have chosen it, not because you cannot do otherwise.
So she was a real inspiration for you in defining a woman's sense of identity that involved independence and thinking for herself.
Yes, but it wasn't strictly meaning, as we can say. She wasn't avoiding other ways, because in the same time, she wanted me to, for her, being independent was also to make sure you can cook what you eat, to make sure you can have your house ready and very clean, etc. So it wasn't only the selfishness or the independence in economic point of view, but very broad things. Yeah.
Now, the other stories that were in your mind were stories of French culture, and you ultimately went to France and completed your education. What was it like to, having studied French for so long, to finally come to France and see the places that you'd read
Yes. I always say that when I arrived to France, I had the problem of certainty somehow, because I didn't know if I knew this country before or not. I have been educated in French, as I said previously, and not only the language, but the language as a vehicle of a culture. And history, I was very much interested by literature, and I read a lot about that. So even when I happened to discover African writers of this big movement of negritude, they were writing in French. So I have so many souvenirs without having been in a place.
We should explain the negritude refers to the writings of the great African intellectuals, some of whom ultimately led their country, but who had been educated in France.
Yes, this was one of the one of the movement which can be seen as the Pan-African movement transformed after the World War II. You know that the participation of African soldiers during World War II along the allies have contributed in the awareness for independence, and this awareness was going along with the rediscovering the African identity, and they've written a lot in this movement, most of them in French, and that has been fed by this movement also. So.
In France, you undertook legal studies, but you chose to emphasize to become a criminologist, and correct me if I'm wrong, as opposed to practicing law primarily. Is that correct?
Yes, but not only. Criminologist is not the only way of practicing law. I've chosen criminal law and criminology because, as I was thinking, it's one of the field of law where you can work for others. We say in French, le droit des autres. So, and also I was attracted by this way of putting the human aspect in perspective, which I wasn't finding in other field of law. And in France, I had an opportunity not only to pursue my studies, but to practice law.
And then, once you've completed your studies, you're working as a lawyer, history comes to your doorstep and away from your country. Did you know in advance of the events in your country that were about to lead to genocide? Did you keep informed about what was going on in your country?
Sure. The history didn't come on my door. I have been always with history. And sometimes I'm surprised not to have went on in this field. And my mother's songs were evoking Rwanda every time. And actually, I learned this country as well as I learned France by books. I learned Rwanda by songs, and particularly my mother's songs.
And were these songs told the story of the history of your country, or?
Some of them, but most of them were describing places. So I knew them quite well in songs. I didn't know the places. At the point that the first time I came to Rwanda after the genocide, once I was crossing a river, and they told me, this is Nyabarongo River. I said, wow, and I sang the song.
So the stories and the pictures were in your head, even though you had never been there.
Yeah, and I have been always involved in community work while I was at school, and in secondary school, in the university, and
But you mean with the Rwandan community, or
not only with the Rwandan community. In my secondary school, I was in a Zairian school in a town called Kolwezi, and we were playing theater. We were writing in the review of the school, and I've always mixed my interests. But Rwanda has remained a leitmotiv, always. To say that I wasn't surprised that my country will experience the genocide is too much. But I had some, how you say, presentiments.
Inkling, a sense that something was going to happen, a foreboding?
Yes. Sense of something will happen, and this sense was incited also by the analysis of the facts. We could see that we are going to a major conflict. When we, you know that the war started in October 90, and I've been followed it since the beginning. And when the Arusha Agreement, the peace accord, was signed in August 93, I remember that I had a bad feeling. I said, during a war, you can see where, what the picture is. But the Arusha Agreement were just too nice to be true.
It appeared to be a settlement, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and in 94, when the genocide, just 2 months before the genocide, I remember that I was trying to discuss with other Rwandese to tell them, I think that, because there were systematic killings, selected killings. And I remember once Félicien Gatabazi, who was one of the leader of a political party in the opposition, has been killed in front of his house. And I heard it and I got threatened. I went to see others and tell them, I think we should try to speak up. If they have killed Gatabazi, I don't know if they can be stopped again. I remember that they told me that, we were in Paris, they told me that, people are not interested by our problems. And one of the women I was proposing this told me, oh, Alice, you want to put us in your problems. But she has lost most of the members of our family later on. And the day the plane was shooted the day that
the president of Rwanda was killed, which then precipitated all of the violence that the immediate apparent cause of the violence and leading to the genocide.
I remember that when I heard that, I got definitely afraid, and the day after, the genocide started.
Well, you were in France, and France was playing a military role in Rwanda in terms of the provisions and the arms it was providing, and you became actively involved in trying to influence the French debate about France's policy toward Rwanda. Tell us a little about that. What were the difficulties in explaining what was going on in Rwanda?
First of all, I started with a wrong analysis, thinking that they don't know. They don't know.
They being the French. Yeah.
Yes, they don't know. The leader, other political leaders are not aware of what they are doing, and later on, maybe after explaining them, they will happen to know. But later on, we learned that it was a deliberate support to the regime of Habyarimana. And we tried many things. First of all, to gather up a support of French in France and others. We tried also to lobby the political leaders in the Senate, in the Parliament, or elsewhere in political parties. And there were some objective obstacles because the African affairs are dealt in the office of the president in France, and it's his own discretion. But there were also some non-interest for...
Apathy on the part of the French.
Yes, because at that time it has become so usual that an African country is having a conflict again. And after in the post-Cold War era, they were more interested in what's happening in the east of Europe and also in Asia. This was trendy, but the empire no longer. And Rwanda is a very poor country, not interesting for that. I remember when we used to tell them to speak about Rwanda. They say, remind me, where is it again? Near which big country again? So we have to explain that it's near Zaire and so on. And I remember, and I would like to salute the commitment of some of our French friends and non-French friends living in France. But the blindness of most of the political leaders is just unacceptable.
Now, at about this time, you had an occasion to meet with a Rwandan woman who had been brought to Brussels. Tell us a little about that experience, but also how it helped draw you back to Rwanda and to focus on the issues pertaining to the violation of women in your country.
When I met her, I was really wondering about the need of trying something in France. And I was evaluating the impact of what we have tried to do and what we have succeeded to do, and also vis-a-vis of the need of our resources at home. And one day I happened to go to Brussels, where I met a young survivor of sexual violence.
Her name was?
I can call her Clementine.
Fine.
Yeah. Clementine has survived sexual violence and genocide and was in a hospital taken them by an NGO. And I went to meet her. A few times before, African Right has documented, among others, the systematic and widespread sexual violence committed during the genocide, including as a tool of genocide, as a weapon of war. And I went to see this young woman. She was 17 at that moment. And I remember I've met somebody who was just smiling, discussing with us. But when I happened to read her medical file and see what she has experienced, I was totally shocked. I was totally shocked. This young person have been gang raped, I happen to know. She was explaining us during 3 months how they were taking them and leaving them and so on. And also, she needed some surgery, reconstruction. She was there for that. Because after having raped her, they have threw acid in her womb. And this young person has also contracted HIV. This is somebody who was 17 years old. And this issue wasn't mentioned. Maybe genocide was just too huge to think about what were considered as details. And for me, it wasn't a detail. I went back to Paris, and at that time, we were celebrating International Women's Day in '95. And I went to see the comrade and try to convince them to have a special discussion on that and to condemn it at least. But l'Union de Femmes Françaises, which was the most important umbrella organization of French women organizations, was celebrating its 50th anniversary, and have so many problems in the agenda that the time possible to allocate to this issue was 1 minute. They asked me to come and to speak among many others during 1 minute about the problem of Rwanda. Was I wrong or right? I don't know, but I was considering that this was just too few for the problem. Not only because as a Rwandese I was feeling it, I cannot ignore this part, but also, except Bosnia and Haiti, that was the first time we heard about this systematic sexual violence as a tool of genocide. And as women activists, I was thinking that this was the time to sit down and to allow it enough time. Because it was raining all the capital of women work in terms of women's rights and other defenders of women's rights. And for me, it wasn't understandable just to allocate 1 minute. But maybe I was wrong. What I decided is that it was not enough for me, and I was preferring not to mention it at all. And then we had an important colloquium at Paris 8, which was one of the most progressive universities in Paris. And they have worked a lot to try to see what they can do with us to address some of our problems. But in this process, when I mention sexual violence, once again it appears as a detail. Only one lecturer from Cameroon came and see me and asked me to come to a seminar in anthropology of conflict to speak about that. But the audience was saying, fine, but. So afterward, I started to tell to myself that maybe I was just wasting my time there, because too much frustration, too much energy, too much time dedicated for hearing that these were details. And maybe I started to think that as an insider, outsider, maybe I can help in this matter.
So you decided then to work toward putting the violation of women as a human rights issue on the agenda for the discussion of justice in Rwanda, and you decided to go back to Rwanda.
Yes. I knew that I will go back, but I think maybe it has led me it hurried me to go back. And I was thinking maybe in going there and try to work with the youth as a lecturer, to try to lecture criminology, which maybe could explain more in a more detailed way the problems we were encountering, and also seek for the solutions. And also to work with others who have tried some other things to see how we can put it in the Rwandan agenda. It means at home to have it as one of the major issues, and also for those who want to address the Rwandan problem, to convince them that's one of the most important. I knew for sure that we were so overwhelmed that sometimes it was just difficult. I don't think that people were reluctant because they didn't want it, but sometimes you are just overwhelmed. And I was thinking that this can be the piece, a piece I can take and try to achieve, a narrow one, but one of them.
Now, as you go back and assume this role at the university and as a mediator between women and the International Court, help us understand what it's like to be between, on the one hand, the women who've suffered, on the other hand, the international system of justice, and particularly help us understand the feelings of the women who have suffered these violations. What are the particular difficulties presented to them in coming forth to seek justice before the tribunal?
For the first question, I think what I've tried first is to say, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't understand. I know that I spent so much time in radio programs and other to try to explain it in France. I knew that in an intellectual manner I can dissect it and come to see what were the mechanisms. But at the end of the day, I say, but why? So I don't think that I had an answer. The other thing which has assisted me in this process was to say every time, if I was them, if it was me, every time, while approaching them, while formulating their need, and in the relationship I have with them, with somebody who has suffered, something you'll never understand, but you can try to understand. And the difficulties for these women to come to before the international justice were many. Some of them were general to Rwandese, and others particular to these women. What they were sharing with other Rwandese is that the circumstances of the commission of genocide implies the fact that the international community didn't take some responsibility while knowing the preparation of genocide. The second thing, which never appears, is that Arusha, where the International Tribunal has its seats, is, in the memory of Rwandese, a sign of failure. I spoke about the Arusha Agreement of August 93. We felt it a lot. Many Rwandese, as myself, were expecting so many things from this Arusha Agreement. But it was a failure, and a failure which name is genocide. And also, we felt lonely. I remember that I was in France. They were celebrating the 5th anniversary of the end of Nazism. But they didn't want to hear about genocide in Rwanda. So it's something, it's a wound. It's a wound for us. And also the circumstances of the creation of this tribunal has implicated some clash between the Rwandan government and the United Nations. Plus the fact that United Nations have a bad memory in the context of Rwanda. I talk about the 61 when my parents fled, but UN was supervising the elections. It didn't prevent something, and so on. One Rwandan official said that United Nations have 72 years of litigation with Rwanda. But now, to give you an example, when Justice Arbo came in Rwanda in May '97, she was received by a demonstration in the street.
She is a justice of the International Tribunal, which was established to deal with the legal issues with genocide.
Yeah, she was. Justice Arbo was the Chief Justice, excuse me, after Justice Goldstone, and now she has been appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada. She's no longer. And at that time when she came, she had been received in '87 by a demonstration. Now, speaking about the specific problems of these women, I think it's not particular to Rwandese women. Not only those who have experienced sexual violence at that level, but we know from the data we have that no person, no human being who have experienced sexual violence can come easily speak about that. It involves other aspects. It involves trauma. It involves
their relationship to their body, basically.
The relationship, the body, and particularly what I've discovered with these women is it's just if their body is no longer theirs. Not only they have this problem of the violation of their rights, they have a problem of the community who has witnessed their guiltiness. That's how they live it. But also they are in conflict with their bodies. How do you live with a body which has been taken from you? Your psychosexual identity was being grasped from you. And it's a burden because you must live with it. But in the same moment, I guess that it's no longer yours because anybody can come and use it as he wants. So, how to live with that? How to live with the medical consequences? I told you about Clementine. She has been lucky enough to go to receive some type, but Clementine is not an exception. There are so many Clementine in my country.
Now, the interesting issue that's raised here and what you're suggesting is that on the one hand, there is the satisfaction of international justice being done. There is a tribunal, there are hearings, there is a verdict, there may be an admission of guilt. But on the other hand, that is different than coming to some sort of reconciliation in the hearts of these women, of reconciling themselves to what was done. If that may not even be the right word, justice may be a better word. But part of your project is to bring these two worlds together. On the one hand, international justice, but on the other hand, the real situation, the real feelings, the real injustices that have been done to these women. How do you go about doing that? Is it about listening to them or what?
My focus is to try to know their needs in terms of justice. And it involves, of course, to know them, because I don't assume that I know. What I've learned in my books don't tell me what are their needs. And I told you that once home, the task was to listen to them. I concentrated much of my effort in organizing fora to let them speak, to let those who have lived, who worked with them, speak about that, to listen to them, and to try to translate it maybe in this boring language, which is law. Yeah. Unfortunately, and that's one of the reasons that the access of the tribunal is that difficult, except the geographical and the political. But even the experienced lawyers, maybe just don't understand this so sophisticated language. So the issue was, first of all, to listen to them and try sometimes to put some advisor of the tribunal in contact with them. Those who work, for example, in the sexual assault team, when they need witnesses, we try to go, we try to discuss, we organize workshops to try to see how to approach them, you see. And maybe one of the most important for me has been to try to build a rehabilitation program, which we have started since August '97.
And what is involved in that rehabilitation program?
Mostly to address the consequences of genocide. They assume that the provision of Rule 34 assume that in most of the witnesses can be the victims. So before having them in court or during, as measure of protection of witnesses, to offer them some assistance. But we try to use this bridge to extend it as much as possible to have a consistent program of rehabilitation, which will involve some legal advice, of course, but also counseling, but more, how can I say, medical support. We are still fighting for that. We hope that will succeed.
Has the International Tribunal done some things that you think are right?
They are the one to say what is right or wrong.
But I mean right in a moral sense, not in a legal sense.
No, I understand what you mean. Yes, as I told you some time ago, it's difficult to say what is the thing to do to address the issue of justice, and that's what I will say in brief. But what is important is to dissect the causes, the consequences, and then to try to see. International tribunal is only a mechanism. They don't speak about domestic court, but we have some, and they are trying to do their best. They don't speak about extra-legal mechanisms, which are more economic empowerment, income-generating activities, or medical support. What I think have come out from the tribunal, beside the importance of this legal precedent on rape in its definition and also in its characterization, I think that the world needed to know that it happened. We know. We learned it the hard way. But following the discussions, the debates, to know if it has been a genocide or not, which has kept busy the Security Council for a while instead of intervening, we must acknowledge that it is important that in international court rule that there has been a genocide distinct of the war. This one thing. The second thing now, maybe not only for Rwandese, but for those who are attracted or human rights activists, there are some principles which are being put in action as the Yamashita principle of common responsibility. It has been used in the case of Akayesu, which has been sentenced, including for sexual charges, not having committed it, but having incited it and let it commit it.
So that a guilty person was found guilty because he gave orders to make something happen.
Yeah, because it was in his office when some women were raped, and while they were being raped, he said to those who are the rapists, "Don't ask me again how a Tutsi woman tastes like." And it has been sentenced. And for us, it's also a recognition, a rehabilitation, a type of it. One other thing is that Jean Kambanda, a former prime minister who was one of the leaders of the genocidaire regime, confessed and pled guilty. I think that for those who are familiar with the context of Rwanda, this is very important to see a man as Kambanda, who has been fed with ethnic hatred, to acknowledge. Yes, these are some of the...
But you believe that there must also be domestic Rwandan versions of seeking justice, and you are involved in a process of restoring Jachachach. Explain that to us.
Yes, I want to say again that we have our judicial system trying to be built, and we encounter some important problems. Among them, we have so many prisoners, and we have one of the most overcrowded prisons. we have thousands and thousands of persons in prison. And the difficulties to try them and other components of our conflict as the break of the ties, the social ties, the fracture of our community has led us to try to think about other mechanisms, including those which emphasize not only the punishment per se, but which has as goal to restore the social fabric. One of them, and one of important we have found, is what we call gachacha. Gachacha is our ancient way of resolving our conflict. When I say ancient, I mean pre-colonial. It has existed during the colonization, but weakened, and it still exists. Otherwise, I can tell you, vis-a-vis of the mass participation, the coming back of returnees, Rwanda would have known other major conflict. We had two miracles in '94, just after the genocide, and in '96, with the different returnees. I can tell you that myself, I was worried. I wasn't sure that it won't lead to a clash. And unfortunately, to put people in prison was also a means of protecting them. But we try to revisit this gachacha mechanism with the hope that it will help us in this painful process of trying to seek some solutions to our conflict.
You're playing such an important role in the recovery of your country, and I think our audience would be interested in knowing what in your background prepared you, or in the situation, to deal with the emotions that you must be experiencing as you do this work.
I don't think I'm playing an important role. I'm just trying to give my contribution. I know that some maybe unknown are playing most important role. I'm trying to do my part. But what helped me in this process, maybe, I don't know, maybe I tell you that I had a very nice childhood. I've been gifted to have my parents and to have them giving me such a time. I learned to get interested by others' suffering, which can sometimes help me to be relative in our problems. We are not alone. Through my reading and helped by one of my school teacher, Papa Raf, I learned a lot about what the Native Americans have suffered, what the Armenians, the slavery, what was it all about, the Jewish, and others. So I have been working in the ANC office, African National Congress, between '93 and '94 in Paris. And I know what is apartheid and others. And I think that I've been also given love enough to try to share with others. Simply, when they ask me in a radio program what to do with women who have experienced sexual violence, I said so spontaneously, one of the first things is to love them, to reintegrate them in the community of human beings, because that's the issue. Also, it's not only the issue. I think that I've had an opportunity also to have meeting, I don't know, rencontre. I've met people all along in my life who have given me time, generosity, generously given me something. And I think that's a tribute also I'm giving to them. People have taken time for me. People have taught me things and given me. So I think that I can try to give to others also.
So in a way, your cosmopolitanism, all the different experiences that have taken you away from from your country, were really learning experiences to reinvigorate your Rwandan identity. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I think so. It has certainly helped a lot. It has certainly helped a lot.
Is it also the case that when you come up, when it is so dark out, when you experience death to such a degree that is there some sort of an urge to contribute to a rebirth?
Yes, and it's in contributing to rebirth, you are contributing to your rebirth, because I am not alone, but I lived so deeply. I had so much the feeling of being, dissolved. I was alive, I was working, but I was feeling being, physically destroyed. I lived it that way. And during all this depression, I was trying to cry that I'm alive. I'm lucky to be alive, as Tracy Chapman will sing. I'm lucky to be alive, and I want to stay alive. And this obsession of living, I met it when I went back to Rwanda in '95. I was struck by the way people, were just celebrating to be in Rwanda. That was amazing for me. But this is an instinct also of survival. When you have approached the death, there were so many dead bodies in Rwanda, just in the street. These people who have came the first to Rwanda, their first duty was to bury. And burying was an activity in Rwanda. Each Saturday there was national burying. And beside that, there were marriages. Each Saturday, you didn't know where to go. And I think that our people have done a lot for that. And I must salute that also. We have been helped, but we have tried hard to stay alive.
Thank you very much for this fascinating, complex discussion of the rebirth of your country. I know that you told me that when you came back, a friend said, you can't just sit around, you've got to be willing to come back and get your feet in the mud. And you clearly have done that. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for joining us for this conversation with history.
Thank you.